Some of the strongest words concerning speeches actually came from a white civil rights supporter by the name of Walter Reuther, who's on your ID sheet. So again, some of the strongest words in support of Kennedy's bill actually came from a white civil rights advocate by the name of Walter Reuther. Now, he was a labor union leader, and he worked for the United Automobile Workers Union, which was a major union in the United States at that point, and still is a huge union organization. Okay, what would that organization be based on? United Automobile Workers Union. Detroit, okay? So, Reuther was a white American labor union leader. He spoke in support of the bill during this march, and he had been a very successful union leader, and he had transformed the United Automobiles Workers Union into a major force, not only in the automobile industry, but within the Democratic Party also. So you could bet that most of the people that worked for the United Automobile Workers Union in Detroit were of what political affiliation? Democrats. Okay? So he was a very powerful man. He wasn't just some nobody up there speaking, and the significance was he was white. Okay, and he represented the largest labor union, or one of the largest in the country. And this is what Reuther said, and again, I don't want you to write this down necessarily, but listen and picture this coming from the mouth of a white person in this time. He said, quote, "I am for civil rights because I believe that freedom is an invisible value, that no one can be free unto himself. And when Bull Connor and his police dogs and fire hoses destroy freedom in Birmingham, he is destroying my freedom in Detroit." I thought this was great, the last part. "We cannot defend freedom in Berlin as so long as we deny freedom in Birmingham." That's a great quote when you think about it. We cannot defend freedom in Berlin, which we're committed to do and ready to go to war for, right? For people that aren't even members of our country, so to speak. So as long as we deny freedom in Birmingham. Great quote. Now this final quote, that we cannot defend freedom in Berlin as so long as we deny freedom in Birmingham, who's he taking a shot at? I mean, taking a direct shot at by saying that. Who? Kennedy, President Kennedy, absolutely taking a shot at the president. Because he didn't think the president did enough concerning the rights for Negroes. And this is a very high-ranking, so to speak, important white person in America that's head of one of the biggest unions in the country. Well, Kennedy chose not to attend the march. Why wouldn't he attend the march? Instead, he watched it on TV at the White House. Why didn't he show up and give a speech or whatever? Good guess, but not right. He was afraid of what was going to happen. I wouldn't say he didn't totally disapprove, but I kind of use that term. But why would he might not show up? Okay? I'll ask you this question. This seems arrogant. I got asked to speak at Robert's graduations 3 or 4 years after I left that school. And they had really struggled from the time I left to the present. They had lost enrollment, people were upset, things weren't like they used to be, they weren't successful academically, they weren't successful athletically, and I was a little apprehensive to speak or to show up at Roberts and give that graduation speech. Why might that have been? Why might that have been?
Because you didn't want to make it negative and make it more negative.
Well, kind of, that's very close, but I wanted to focus on those 9 kids that were graduating from high school, not me. And I knew that if I went there, I would be fielding those questions, and the focus of that graduation wouldn't be on those kids, it would be me. I'll give you another example. When I was in Hamilton, Montana as the athletic director many years ago, you ever heard of Huey Lewis? Huey Lewis in the news? Anybody ever heard of that guy? Well, he was a very popular rock and roll musician who lived in Victor, Montana, which was like 10 miles away from Hamilton. And I called him up one day. He's a very friendly guy. My son played soccer with his son when they were tiny. Very nice guy. You couldn't tell he was any kind of a celebrity. But anyway, I called him up one day and I said, would you be willing to come and sing the national anthem for our girls basketball game Saturday? And he said, no, I won't. And I'll tell you why. He said, and I'm not being arrogant, he said, but if I show up, there's going to be more people show up to that basketball game because I'm going to sing the national anthem. And I don't want the focus on me, I want the focus on those girls. I thought that was an unbelievable answer. I mean, he would, if I asked him to come to the school and give us you know, talk to my history class, he'd have done it in a minute, but he just didn't want to take the focus off of the kids. And that's what Kennedy thought. If he went there, he would be the spotlight of the march. He would be the person everybody was paying attention to, and he didn't want that. He wanted the attention on the march itself, not on himself. So he chose not to go. Now, you all, I believe, know that the one speech that caught the nation's attention and became the most historically significant was that of Martin Luther King Jr. Now, he was introduced to speak by A. Philip Randolph. He's the one that introduced Martin Luther King to speak. And we all know in history that his speech will go down as the I Have a Dream speech. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read some excerpts from that speech. You don't have to write them down and see if they're a little bit familiar, okay? Here's some of the things that Martin Luther King said during his time. He said, "So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream." He said, "When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, 'Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.'" Now that's the thing you remember the most about it. Now what you might not know is he wrote this speech, but the most famous parts of the speech, which I read to you, were not in the original text. It was all ad-libbed. It wasn't even in his speech. He ad-libbed it. Now, his speech was written to last 4 minutes. That's when he wrote it. It was to last 4 minutes. With his ad-libbing, etc., it lasted 16 minutes. So it lasted 4 times as long as he had originally wanted to speak. But he kind of got on a roll, and we'll show you parts of it. And he just kind of got on a roll and kept going and gave one of the greatest, most historic speeches in our country's history. Well, the Kennedy administration was relieved because the events of the Civil Rights March actually left positive effects and did influence votes in a positive manner through Congress. The problem was going to be for Kennedy that he was not going to live to see that vote. That vote would come up during the time that Lyndon Johnson served out the rest of Kennedy's term after he was assassinated. So, as a result, the Civil Rights Act did pass. It was referred to as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it was passed during the time Lyndon Johnson turned out the remainder of his term. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you a little extra history here, and that's our next subtopic, and that is the famous speech ends up in good hands. Okay? The famous speech ends up in good hands. You ever kind of wonder? Now, you write that down because I forgot.